Welcome to week 4. I just want to say thank you to all of you who texted and called this week with great questions and insightful observations. And I want to let everybody know, like my phone number, 541-250-1652. Remember, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and sometimes I'm teaching. But reach out when you want to. It's always good to meet you. So let's dig in, shall we? We're at the last section of the Indian Tales sections that I'm sharing with you. Right now, you're in our third part. It's short, and it's doing something really interesting. This is a point where Indian Tales stops feeling like a loose collection of stories and starts to feel like a coherent worldview, a system, a way of understanding how the world works, how it breaks, and how it heals. This is exactly where your upcoming project begins. And you'll get that link this week in week 4. One of the central questions we're going to be exploring is this: how authentically does Jaime de Angelou represent the cultures and stories of the people he lived among? It's not a simple question. De Angelo lived with them for 20 years. He lived with them for 20 years. He was among indigenous communities in Northern California. He spoke their languages. He listened to their stories for decades. He lived alongside them. So on the one hand, he had access that no other outsiders had, but he was also a white European anthropologist and a writer living in the early 20th century and writing for an English-speaking audience. So we have to hold both ideas in our heads at once, which leads us to some deeper questions. As we read this last section here, I want you to begin to ask yourself, so how does de Angelo accurately reflect the stories and lives of the peoples he lived with? How does he embellish? How does he reshape the stories to fit Western storytelling expectations? How does he simplify? How does he romanticize? Is he being respectful? How is he respectful? Or is he just turning their lives into literary material? And here's a key part. There isn't one correct answer. There's only our reading, our thoughtful ability to begin to make comparisons and to inquire honestly. One of the things you'll notice is that these stories don't behave like modern Western fiction. They don't have neat resolutions. They have people kind of always arguing. They don't have tidy moral lessons or predictable character arcs or even a consistent tone. Sometimes they feel abrupt. They will this time. Strange, uneven, and wild. And that's not a flaw. That's a signal that you're encountering a different storytelling logic. So instead of asking, does this story work the way I expect stories to work? We want to ask, what kind of world does this story assume? Here are some of the kinds of questions we might want to ask. Just keep in mind. Keep in mind. What do these stories suggest about human responsibility? A lot of these ideas are in our guidelines, but I'm just sort of saying them now. Attention and our awareness. What does it say about patience and listening and restraint and humility and courage and perseverance? What do they suggest about how people should live together? How power should be handled? How mistakes can be corrected? How is balance restored? And maybe, most importantly, what does it mean in these stories to live well? Now, let's layer some research into this, okay? So we're going to be digging in. You'll see this in the guidelines. You'll be comparing de Angelo's story to other Native American stories. I have a link in the guidelines that have been collected by tribes from across North America. And here's where things get interesting. Every one of those stories, without exception, was originally oral. That means that the voice mattered, the hand motions, where they stopped, where they started their inflection, they yelled, and audience interaction, as D'Angelo mentions, they all matter. So when these stories are written down, something changes, which raises a question: can a written version of an oral story ever be fully authentic? If not, then what does authenticity mean? It's, there's kind of like a loop here. We can really go down this rabbit hole, explore. Some Native American scholars and writers have written about these issues. You might run into them in your research. So take a peek for Native American authors who happen to have written about D'Angelo. Look for the works of tribal historians, indigenous scholars, cultural critics, or even just other websites that archive all these stories, and think about storytelling and cultural preservation and transcription and appropriation and cultural survival, because part of what we're doing in this project is joining a much larger intellectual conversation. Here are a few deeper questions we want to keep in mind. How do D'Angelo's stories preserve history? And how do they preserve atmosphere? How do they function as cautionary tales? How do they teach moral restraint? How do they warn against arrogance? How do they highlight the dangers of selfishness? How do they encourage attentiveness to nature, respect, and love even? Do they offer a psychological map of fear, desire, pride, and humility? And maybe the most subtle question of all: what kind of human beings do these stories seem to be sharing with us? As we read part 3 this week, pay attention to patterns, not plot. Like, who gives warnings? Who ignores them? What happens when rules are broken? What kind of mistakes are punished? And what comes of that? Which mistakes are forgiven? Which ones aren't? Look for repetition. It was a very strong component. Well, as we have sort of an antique, sort of an original text, our text. I won't go into it, but that's very repetitive. 4 versions, same story. And here's something I want you to keep in mind. This assignment isn't about being right. It's about being attentive and creative. It's about slowing down enough to notice cultural assumptions, narrative structures, moral patterns, emotional rhythms. This is deep reading we're about to do, and it's rare to be given this opportunity. You have 3 weeks to work on this assignment. I hope you appreciate that. Finally, I just want to say this project, it's not about judging Jaime D'Angelo. It's about sort of integrating complexity into our minds. It's about how we encounter other cultures. It's about translation, storytelling, power, respect, and intellectual humility. And if you do this work, honestly, you'll end up learning something, and not just about Native American storytelling, but about how cultures communicate meaning. So today, as you read part 3, just begin noticing. Let yourself be curious. Let questions form. And don't rush your answers. And remember, the answers are out there. Your paper is going to grow organically out of what you notice and you wonder about. So, okay. Welcome to week 4. I'll give you a little present. Show you my dog, maybe, if I can find him. There he is. All right. Wesley. Wesley, come. What's he doing? You don't want to come? He's a naughty doggy. All right. Have a great week 4.